Hi and welcome to the Active Code podcast, brought to you by Aspire Active Partnerships. I'm Paul Griffiths and joining me each week on the pod is Luke Johnson.
Aspire Active Partnerships is a community of like-minded business leaders who all believe that collaboration in the sports coaching and children's activity sector is essential for success. We've proven that working in collaboration does benefit business growth and essentially helps more children be more active more often.
To combat physical inactivity, we need organisations that are performing at their very best. Organisations will only operate to high standards if they are led well. So, if we can focus on developing high quality leaders throughout an organisation, not just at the top, customers will experience higher quality services, which means heightened enjoyment levels and increased levels of physical activity. And if we do this at an early age, we know that we can build the foundations for a more active, happier and healthier life. The Active Code investigates what it really takes to be a successful leader and how organisations can combat physical inactivity.
We won't be alone through this journey. We are joined by business owners and experts from our sector, as well as inspirational people from outside our industry. We'll understand the importance of physical activity to our guests, reflect on leadership experiences, and gain thought-provoking insights on how we can crack the Active Code and get more children more active more often. If you like what you hear, please leave us a rating and subscribe wherever you get your pods. During this podcast episode, we should be talking to Rob Wilkinson, Company Director at Moving Matters and It All Matters, based in London and Wiltshire. Before he founded Moving Matters 9 years ago, Rob had extensive experience in the sport and education industry as a franchise owner of a sports coaching company and a school sport partnership development manager. Even though Rob is currently director at both Moving Matters and It All Matters, he also finds time to manage an under-7s football team. We're excited to delve into experiences Rob has as a leader in a variety of capacities, understand what physical activity means to him, and what Rob thinks the industry can learn and do moving forwards to combat physical inactivity and crack the Active Code. So welcome to the podcast, Rob.
Welcome, Rob. Thanks, Paul. Nice to be joining you guys today.
Rob, I've briefly covered your glittering and impressive CV in the introduction. Could you tell us a bit more about your professional journey and transition through your roles?
Sure. So a little bit of an interesting pathway, initially because my undergraduate study wasn't actually in anything related to PE, sport, physical activity. I went to the University of York and studied sociology, which I really enjoyed, and obviously but hadn't really considered where my pathway was going to go long term at that stage. I then had a very short professional career in the greetings card industry, very randomly. But it did. I was a business unit coordinator at that point, so at least gave me some business experience, some business acumen. But it wasn't what I wanted to do long term, and so I then spent a very short period, kind of like a career break, I guess, going off to the States, where I had a friend and did some coaching for 5 months out there, and really enjoyed that experience. And obviously it tapped into a background and love of physical activity sport. And so when I came back, I set up a franchise with Premier Soccer, which is going back quite a number of years now, before it became sort of Premier Sport, and then obviously went on to become a different name. So I did that for a couple of years, enjoyed the experience of working in primary schools and really getting to understand the environment of education. I think I've always been very inspired by education and educationalists, and so having the opportunity to work in that sphere, I really enjoyed. I think probably I wanted to have a bit more autonomy myself. So, as a franchisee, wasn't maybe quite the right fit for me. And that's why I decided to give up my franchise. It also coincided with getting to know people within the Lambeth School Sports Partnership, and the partnership development manager at the time, Gillian Brunton, wouldn't say necessarily headhunted me, but like saw that I kind of had a skill set to offer. And she offered me a role called as a director of coaching within the School Sports Partnership alongside an SSCO role. There was quite a bit of money that went into School Sports Partnerships at that time through the lottery and some other funding streams, which was all directed on sort of extracurricular and coaching. And so she obviously saw that I had a skill set in that and the background. And I started working for the Lambeth School Sports Partnership, and then just kind of went progressively up the food chain, I guess. Became her assistant, and then when she left, I inherited the School Sports Partnership. Basically, at the time that the national funding for partnerships ended, so kind of found myself in a position as like assessing what I was going to do, and that's how Moving Matters was born out. Really, sort of the ending of the Lambeth School Sports Partnership became the beginning of Moving Matters, and that was coming up to 10 years ago, basically this August.
So a veteran, Rob, a veteran. That's right. What I find really interesting there, Rob, is I think a lot of people in our sector in general tend to just kind of fall into coaching, whether it's at university or after studying at university, and then set up a business and kind of follow that path. But I think what's really interesting now, you've shared with us that you've actually had a quite a good solid foundation by the sound of it, lots of experience in different businesses and different organisations. So has that helped you build your business to where it is today?
Yeah, I would hope so. I mean, I think the first thing was that I started out in an industry that I knew pretty quickly. I mean, greetings cards. It wasn't going to get me out of bed in the morning, but I worked with some really good people there, and that just gave me an awareness of, I guess, kind of wanting to have autonomy and control in my own world. And I guess being a franchisee was kind of part way towards being that, but not 100%. And then, ultimately it took me a few years to sort of lead the School Sports Partnership and then ultimately be in this position I'm in now, which, I thrive off because all the decision making is largely governed by me. I kind of think I feel I thrive in that environment best. It's not to say I don't listen to people around me and the environment, the different people who have influence, and I respect, but ultimately, I'm in control of my own destiny, and I take a lot from that.
Sure. And you said that the greeting card industry didn't get you out of bed in the morning, but obviously, Moving Matters does. So why does it get you out of bed in the morning? What's that passion?
Well, I think it's twofold, really. I mentioned that education is something that I find very inspiring. I think it's a huge vehicle for change in our society. And I've seen it in lots of young people, and hopefully sort of experienced it a bit myself within the state education sector. And ultimately, the importance of the subject that we're so passionate about, physical education and physical activity and sport. So those are always things that have formulated a big part of my my upbringing, and so it's all about purpose, really. And I think returning to what my purpose is, or what I feel the purpose of Moving Matters as a company, and my own individual personal ambitions and purpose, is a really key aspect of doing what I do. And it's ultimately to try and create a healthier society for the future. I think it's so, as we sit here in this global pandemic, never has that been more prevalent than now.
Sure.
You probably just referenced something on your LinkedIn page. You mentioned your organisation, Moving Matters. Its core function is providing high quality and a greater quantity of opportunities for young people to move more. So I guess you've just talked through then what that motivation came from. So it's clear that PE sport and physical activity is embedded in your professional and I believe personal life as well. But what does physical activity mean to you?
Well, I call my company Moving Matters So I think that kind of encapsulates how important I think it is. That name evolved from a conversation over a bottle of wine with a friend who works in marketing, and he was really getting me to drive down at what it was that I wanted to be doing and what it was that I wanted my company to reflect. And ultimately, it is that movement is important. Movement is important in our society for like a huge range of reasons. Some that I've had personal experience of myself, and some that I've obviously seen other people have experiences of, and that's what we're about. That's what physical activity means to me. It's a core component of having a healthier and better society, really.
Absolutely. So you get young people moving through your professional life, and apart from joining in with the under sevens football training yourself, how do you keep active outside of work?
So I played football for a long time, and I have to say I really miss sport these days. Like that. Being in a changing room and having that sort of social aspect is something that is very, very difficult to replace when you move away from that. My second son was born, and that kind of kiboshed my footballing playing days. So semi-pro football was being replaced with running. I did quite a bit of running for over the last sort of 5 years with half marathons and trail runs and that sort of thing. But I mean, probably the shining light for lockdown for me was getting my road bike in about this time last year, and I've subsequently really got into my cycling. Lots of my friends have got into it over the past few years, so I'm a fully fledged mammal these days, busting out the Lycra on a Sunday morning. So I tend to sort of do a long ride on a Sunday. And I have to say we got a Peloton as well during lockdown, which has also been great. So I'll probably do a run a week and maybe a long cycle, a couple of Pelotons, very important to me to kind of keep active.
Yeah, quite right as well, Rob. And I think obviously you've been quite active on Twitter. I know we're kind of we're recording this in January, so we're in a deep lockdown. But I know back in the summer we had several conversations. And did you ever get involved with Joe Wicks over that first lockdown? Did he engage you in activity?
No, I mean I have to say I was one of the however many thousand that tuned in on that first day, with my boys all ready to go. And we did it for about 20 minutes, but the kids lost interest quite quickly. And ultimately, it was maybe I felt a bit more sort of adult focused than child centric. So I mean, I think the guy needs to be praised for activating a nation, and I think anyone who puts themselves out there like that needs to be embraced. But it's not for me in terms of doing that sort of a workout. But any person that can get that amount of kids active needs to be praised. I know he's been a bit vilified within the sort of PE sector. And I can understand framing physical education as what he was offering was obviously inaccurate, but ultimately, he gave up his time and has got a lot of people active. So I have a sort of balanced view on it, really. I don't think he should have branded it as physical education, but by the same token, he needs to be and praised, and has been. To be fair, the guy's got an MBE, so he hasn't come out of the situation too bad.
Not bad, is it? Not bad. I agree. I think Luke and myself agree on that. The guy's done an amazing job in terms of activating children and families as well. So some of the stick he gets is a little bit uncalled for, but
absolutely. I listened to his Desert Island Disc randomly enough. And he came across very well on that, to be honest. And his backstory is a good one. He's not had opportunities that maybe lots of other people have done. So, I think you always have to admire that in people. And I think people are very quick to criticise on social media, and I think it's a bit unfair.
Going back to your weekends in Lycra, Rob, I remember in the middle of just after lockdown one, I think it was. You took a picture on and posted on Twitter of a deserted London city centre, which was quite a apocalyptic picture. Really, it kind of hit home quite a lot on the state of it where everyone was. But what are the benefits to physical activity to you? You've said that you obviously miss sport and football being the main sport you played, but just generally, what do you feel the benefits are to you as a person?
Yeah. Well, firstly, just touching on that ride. I just thought, well, if I go into London, it's going to be totally deserted. This is just going to be like, the most amazing ride down Whitehall with like nobody there and cycling up to Buckingham Palace. It was pretty magical, to be honest. It was a beautiful day, and I've actually subsequently done a few rides up into City. It's pretty cool. Fundamentally, movement, physical activity, sport, it energizes me. It provides me with something which I know that I need for my personal well-being. If I'm not able to be active for a number of days, or I feel like I'm slightly out of shape or whatever, I don't feel quite like I'm 100% myself. Obviously, during this last 12 months, which has been very challenging, and over the last 10 years, managing a business and the stresses and strains that come from that, physical activity, getting out on the bike or on a run, allows me to clear my head and focus my thoughts, and it almost allows me to disappear from some of those strains, even just the living, having a young family and all those sorts of things, plus your business and that sort of thing. Like there's a lot going on in my world, and certainly has been for the last sort of 5 or 6 years. I do, as I mentioned, miss the social aspect of playing football, but cycling, there is a bit of a social aspect to that. So even the opportunity to hang out with a friend and have a cycle ride with them and catch up with someone else, which is obviously not been that easy to do over the lockdown periods we've experienced. That also provides me with something else which is important to me.
So you've clearly got a motivation and a big desire to keep active, and you've talked about the benefits, but some people don't. So how do you promote physical activity, especially to those people that maybe aren't interested in a specific sport?
It's tricky. I think it's very easy for people, certainly within the education sector, to label themselves as like non-sporty, and obviously, I think people really don't necessarily understand the differences between what physical education is, what physical activity is, and what sport is. So I think a little bit of developing that understanding is important. I am very direct with people that I work with, particularly teachers. So almost every teacher training course I will do, I touch on the Design to Move deadly physical inactivity cycle, which kind of shows that inactive people are less likely to succeed academically, progress to university. They're a greater cost to our health service and our economy subsequently, more likely to have days off work, all of those sorts of things. Physical inactivity is a greater causer of premature death than smoking now globally. And I also share obesity statistics with these people. So in Lambeth, 40% of Year 6 children are overweight or obese. So it's just an astronomical statistic. And I think, these facts are not known to people, and, I don't feel like we can hide from them. I'm sure people have rolled their eyes as I get on my high horse and my soapbox, but it's a truth, and we need to face it. And I'm hugely believe that school leaders, class teachers, school-based staff, it can't be underestimated the power and influence of these people and on young people. They are role models, and even just like, not changing out of what you wear in the classroom to deliver a PE lesson. It's just small things like that I just don't think are acceptable, really. And ultimately, we have to celebrate the successes of what we do within our sector, and inform and try and develop the understanding of those people that haven't been influenced in the way that we have. And unfortunately, education has really marginalised the profile of physical education as a result of focus on academic standards, which we all understand and we all see as important. But we really need to reiterate, why PE is such a vital component of a child's educational experience, and how the amount of activity that they do will impact on their health and also their personal well-being.
Yeah, absolutely. You spoke about some of the data there, Robin. Sport England, their Active Live survey, the latest data that came out last week, actually. So, over half of children and young people at present aren't achieving the average of 60 minutes of physical activity per day. It's about 55%, I think it was. 31% less than 30 minutes on average per day across the week. So that's 2.3 million kids aren't even achieving the 30 minutes on average per day. And I think even more worrying, and I guess kind of based where you are in Lambeth and surrounding areas, there's really worrying data around inequalities, physical activity participation, particularly in less affluent backgrounds and ethnic minorities. So you're right, there is a huge problem. Hence the podcast, and hence why we're having these conversations to really kind of delve into that in more detail. So just moving on, and now you spoke about people in the education sector in particular there, and we're not here to talk about that in as much detail, but I think myself and Luke now are really keen to kind of shift into that leadership approach. So from your perspective, who's the most inspirational leader you've worked with, Rob?
Yeah, so I don't think I've got one person that I could home this answer in on. I've always kind of liked to consider a number of different approaches, and so in response to who's had the most influence, it hasn't just been one person, but I think people that work within our sector tended to have been influenced by their PE teachers, and one of mine, Neil McWilliams, who's actually now the managing director of Oxford United, was certainly a positive influence. Just the manner in which he sort of saw education and went about his job, and kind of the way that he managed people and inspired young people, very influential in my sort of early days. Within my professional community, I think my old boss Gillian Brunton was hugely influential, and Ronnie Heath and John Parsons as well. Jill was dynamic and a very dynamic individual. She certainly sort of marched to the beat of her own drum, and I kind of thought that was a very inspiring approach. She really set high standards for the team that I worked in under her, and she really expected people to meet those standards, which is hopefully something I've taken on. I think in Ronnie and John, they've really been pioneers within the industry for the past 20 years. They've got an unbelievable understanding of child development, which I think is visionary. And they've created a fantastic product and company in Create Development Limited. They've, from the first moment, even more recent times, seeing them, they're always people that I'll take things away from having a conversation with them and feel pretty inspired and energized and motivated. And there aren't loads of those people out there. So I think those individuals would be the people who have probably had the most sort of influence on me, really.
So the kind of key traits you've highlighted there, being dynamic, having high standards, being a visionary or pioneer in the industry, and inspiring others. And moving back to you as a leader, you've talked about how you engage particularly school staff and getting them involved in physical activity and helping them understand the benefits of it. But you as a leader, if we asked one of your colleagues about your leadership style, what do you think they would say?
I don't know. Hopefully positive things. I think the big aspect of the way that I lead is being personable, being approachable, being honest. I feel I am demanding, but I kind of like to establish sort of the relationship first, and ensure that that relationship is on a positive keel. Make sure that the member of staff feels supported, but then make sure that the expectations I have of them are very, very clear, and then ultimately then allowing them to go on and kind of run with the project or the piece of work that I'm asking them to. I think ultimately it's more of a macro rather than a micro management style. I think one of the things as a leader, when it's your own business, it's so difficult to get people to think about the role they play within your company in the way that you do. And I think ultimately you try to empower them to care as much, which is obviously impossible, but you aim to do that as best as possible, really. So I think being approachable, like being honest, frank with people. My staff will always laugh at the word transparency because it's been one of our values for a long time, and so I feel like in being transparent about the way that I lead, I'll admit my mistakes. I want staff to admit the errors that they've made, and I think always kind of dealing in the truth and dealing in the situation is always the best way, really.
Yeah, absolutely. Excuse me, absolutely. I think I'm assuming that your kind of leadership experience has obviously changed over time, given the 10 years that you've been going as a business owner, and I think I can kind of vouch for the struggles at times, I guess, with certain team members. But that's the holy grail, I guess, is getting that team embedded and involved and really kind of on board with what you're trying to achieve as an organisation. And I'm sure you're not alone, Rob. I'm sure you're not alone on that. I think interesting. How many people do you have in your team at the moment, Rob?
So it's dropped a bit as a result of the scenario we're in. So we've got 12 staff, 12 full-time staff. We're normally up around the 20 mark, but we don't have any of our part-time employees working at the moment, which we obviously normally would. That's. Staff, within a business, as you guys will know, your biggest challenge is your management of staff and the amount of time that takes up, and so getting your leadership style right, getting your company feel, your ethos, your values right. I place a lot of value in that.
How would you say, when you talked about the ethos and values of the company, when someone comes on board at your organisation, how do you even start to get them involved in that and to understand that?
The induction. I kind of start to educate people at interview stage, really, about what we're about, because ultimately I always feel that I want the recruitment experience to be two-way. I want to be very real with them about the fact I'm going to have high expectations of them. I'd never talk badly of other coaching organisations, but we do tend to inherit staff who have come in and not been managed in the way that I manage. Expectations aren't as high like in previous roles. They haven't been quality assured in the way that I quality assure, and haven't been developed either, I would say. So I'm very keen to make clear that this is a job and this is what I'm going to want from the job when you start out, so that when they do come into the role and induction, that's reinforced, and you then sort of set those targets or set those expectations for that particular member of staff. I'm also really keen to ascertain what it is that makes them passionate about the work they do, and so for some members of staff, they really enjoy working within our disability program, and so that would be something that I would want them to pursue and to develop. So I think tapping into interests is a really key component, and then working with the staff to develop them in relation to that.
Sure. I think as well, Rob, you touched on there how you're developing your people, the importance of it, because at the end of the day, I know any organisation, any sector is only as good as the people that work within that organisation. Interested just to understand. So I think this happens a lot in many businesses and a lot in our sector from the people we talk to. A lot of leaders will focus on developing their team members, which is mega important given the fact that they're the face of the organisation and working with their customers. Just interested to know what are you working on at the moment to develop your leadership skills to become a better leader?
I mean, at the moment, I'm cooling off on this a little bit. I feel like I did a lot of work on this, on personal development, over the course of the summer. I read some really good books. I started listening to the High Performance podcast, which I got a lot from. And I mean, to be honest, some of the content that we were working with Aspire was brilliant as well, and that all contributed to thinking about how to take the company forward. I rejigged our value system, and absorbed an awful lot of information. And I think it's important, or certainly I feel it's important, to not constantly be taking on information all the time, to be a bit more selective, and to also allow the information you do take on to permeate really, and allow it to develop and be nurtured. Ultimately, if we're always taking on new things, we kind of never allow ourselves to focus on the thing that we've just learnt previously. So I'd say at the moment I'm kind of less charged up because I've been absorbing a lot of information over the past 6 months, and we're trying to roll it out, lockdown aside. I'll always have a book on the go. I'm reading The Shoe King at the moment, Phil Knight's book, about his experience of building up Nike as a company. And I'm still listening to the High Performance podcast, although I'm not listening to it as religiously as what I was in the summer. So I've kind of slowed down a little bit, but have a lot of things that I'm processing through at the moment, and we're working through as a company.
Regards the sector we're in, Rob, a few listeners may have seen on Twitter, you were flying the flag for clarity over a certain primary PE and school premium, and then you got really good engagement and interaction from that, which is really good, and you helped push that issue forward on social media. What are your views on leadership in the sector at present?
Very interesting question. I mean, I think ultimately what's happened over the last 7 years as a result of the PE and school sport premium is this government have created a hugely competitive market. And unfortunately, I feel that has really divided lots of people within the sector. And it strikes me that there isn't really a collective direction. And ultimately, I think that harms the life chances of the people that the children in schools who we're all charged to get moving more ultimately. There isn't what the school sports partnership, for its faults, and it did have plenty. What was so great about it was that everyone was kind of ultimately singing to the same hymn sheet. There was collaboration on a national scale, and there were clear targets. The 5-hour offer. Now, what are we measuring in PE and school sport? What data do we have to show that we're improving, the system in the primary PE physical activity school sport system? I don't think we have that. And so, I think stronger leadership, collaboration, connection is really needed within our sector, and because inactivity, childhood obesity, economic disparity, these things have only been worsened by the pandemic that we're all living through at the moment. And again, being honest, one of the great things about the active partnership is that there is collaboration, there is connection, there is sort of direction, and like-minded leaders can learn from each other, and you ultimately all kind of trying to support each other, and the goal for us all is to get more children active. And I think the whole sector needs more unity ultimately, and I've asked for that on Twitter. I've been very outspoken on this issue, and I don't feel, even as a result of the campaign that many people contributed to over the summer period, we've come back into a new academic year and nothing has changed. No one's speaking to each other across the different sectors. We remain divided, and it's something that I feel passionately about and very disappointed by, to be honest.
Yeah, I think Luke mentioned there about over the summer we saw the mini campaign on Twitter, which was really good, Rob, to what you did and really push that and get other people involved. And like you say, the collaborative side of things, we're obviously big on that ourselves, and it's something that we strongly believe in. And I think the whole data side of things is mega important, and it's just got overlooked for 5-6 years now. And as we creep ever closer to the summer again, I don't know about you, but I've got a funny feeling that we might be in a very similar situation with a lack of clarity, a lack of announcements, no real kind of goal as to what we're trying to achieve. We'll wait and see. I guess we'll see you on Twitter again when we come to the summer.
I 100% agree, Paul. And I mean, I think it will be embarrassing for this government if we return to that situation again. Ultimately, we're in a global pandemic. Never has being active been more important. And the statistics you touched on earlier, we're in a negative cycle. At least we saw activity levels drop during the first lockdown, and that was in the summer months. We're now in the winter months, and who knows when we're going to come out of this situation. It's not sunny and nice weather outside, so those activity levels will be even less. But it would be embarrassing if we return to a situation where I'm back on Twitter, posting my videos. It shouldn't even, we should have clarity now, shouldn't we? We should have had clarity at the beginning of this academic year. This should be led by those people who, have the ear of the sports minister and the education and health minister. It destabilizes our industry. Markets destabilize from uncertainty, and our market is no different. It affects the employment of thousands of staff across the country, and that's not to be underestimated and undervalued. So yeah, we call for action and clarity very, very quickly on this one. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think the podcast, Rob, is all about us trying to understand how we can create better organisations across the country to get more children more active more often. And I'm a firm believer throughout my business ownership experience of learning a lot from other sectors. I think we don't do enough in our sector, and probably the education sector as well seem to be a little bit behind in other sectors. And I'm just interested to know what your thoughts are on that. Can this sector learn from other sectors to help combat physical inactivity?
Oh yeah, 100%. I think the first thing is that there are so many bureaucratic and administrative inefficiencies within education. The fact that we still receive checks from schools is just ridiculous, really. And just a very small example of that.
Do you still get those delivered by pigeon as well, Rob?
Yeah, absolutely. It just, we've got to move more with the times. And I think, whenever I speak to friends from different sectors and talk to them about some of the things that, we experience, they're just baffled by it, really. And I just think we need to be, ultimately, schools have been made to run more like businesses, and the requirements of schools have become greater and greater. And I think that's potentially something that needs to be evaluated and reviewed. But ultimately, yes, I think we can learn about how to be more efficient. I also think we need to really tap into the health sector. Particularly within our sector, I think we need the people that we send into schools and who can influence others need to be better educated around, what about food education, about food knowledge. And I think that's something that we could potentially really embrace and use our sector as a vehicle to get more of that information into schools and to parents. And I think the health sector is definitely one to sort of to look at. Increase awareness and all that sort of stuff, better food choices, support families.
I just want to touch on now, Rob. We spoke about obviously working in the primary education sector in particular, and for forever, all we hear about is the importance of teachers teaching physical education, and a lot of people out there have the opinion that organisations such as Moving Matters shouldn't be involved in primary schools, whether that's from a physical education perspective or a physical activity point of view or school sport. So where do you stand on that, Rob?
I find it very offensive in many ways to our sector and the community of sports coaching organisations who have existed for a long time, and like the white van man analogy, I just find repugnant, to be honest. And very ignorant of a lot of people who do a lot of hard work and have really kind of strived to provide the best quality physical education that they can to children to get them more active. Ultimately, I think it's like 75% of PE lessons are taught by sports coaches and sports coaching organisations. And so ultimately, we're a sector that needs to be recognised. That's not to say that there isn't bad practice out there, but there's bad practice in education. There's bad practice from the unqualified class teacher who really isn't bothered by physical activity or PE or sport. They don't understand it, they don't get it, they don't see it as important, and so the children in their class aren't motivated to do it. The people that we put into schools are motivated by those things. And so ultimately we need to embrace all those different people who teach physical education, whether or not that be the class teacher, whether or not that be the coach, the TA, the member of support staff, whoever it is that goes into school and teaches physical education, we need to embrace that person and support them in whichever way we can. Now, ultimately, for me, this comes down to Ofsted driving standards in this area of the subject, in this subject area. If we had PE lessons being observed by Ofsted inspectors on a regular basis, then standards would improve. Schools would create a much greater accountability for delivery. I touched on it earlier. What do we have to show? What data is there that we can show from what the PE and sport premium spending? How do we know that teachers are better at teaching physical education? How do we know that children are more active? We don't. And we need to create that accountability. That ultimately, and that comes down to Ofsted. So, for me, it's about embracing all the different people that contribute. Ultimately, if there's a coach in your school that needs educating, then educate them, develop them. If there's a teacher in the school that needs educating, developing, we do the same. This government have created an autonomous system where schools get to make their own decisions about who teaches PE. And ultimately, we're not going to change that if this government, remains in place, and they're obviously, will do for the next few years. So let's create a system where Ofsted or schools themselves create accountability, they set high standards, and then we as organisations, schools, teachers, coaches, we have to meet those standards. For Moving Matters, we strive to meet those standards every day, every academic year. we see it as hugely important, and we get why there's negativity at certain points, but ultimately we're all striving to do the same things, and our ambition is to get children more active, and that's a good ambition. It's a valued ambition, and I think everyone needs to recognise the importance of that.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. Thanks for sharing that.
Very, very, very well put, Rob. And it links with that collaborative approach you talked about in the sector. That's what we need, and we all need to be driving forward towards the same thing. Absolutely. We have a couple of questions that a bit like spotlight questions. We want to give our listeners some quick wins or something tangible to take away with them straight away. So if listeners wanted to enhance their leadership skills or business acumen, what 3 books, podcasts, or people would you recommend?
So, I mean, this taps into what, a lot of the study and, the reading I did this summer and the kind of work I did on personal development. So I read Oversubscribed by Daniel Priestley, which I know, Paul is a big advocate for his work. And I think you probably recommended the book to me, to be honest. So, yeah, I found that a brilliant piece of work, and have continued to tap into sort of information that he shares on Facebook groups that he hosts, and through Twitter feeds, and it's a bit of a reference point, the book. I read Legacy by James Kerr, which is a journalist's account of following the All Blacks, and the leadership, like the leadership skills or the leadership qualities that kind of instilled within that particular organisation. I loved that book, and felt very inspired by it, and kind of came back in and have definitely tried to sort of utilise some of the key learnings and takeaways from it within my business. And then I started listening to the High Performance podcast, which is Jake Humphreys, Damien Hughes, and that I listened to a few from the first series, some really interesting stuff like Dylan Hartley, Phil Neville, and just all sharing their high performance journeys, and just some of the key takeaways, the things that they see as important to them for their own leadership, and ultimately things that you can then translate into your business. So Oversubscribed, Daniel Priestley, Legacy by James Kerr, and the High Performance podcast would be my 3.
And 3 good picks there, Rob, as well. Completely agree with you on that. They're all brilliant reference points for lots of stuff that you can implement within the organisation that you work in. So yeah, thank you for that.
That Legacy book touches on some leadership characteristics you talked about initially as well, like being supportive, honest, and transparent. So it's clear that you embrace that. I'm interested that actually if Rob
does Rob sweep the sheds. I think is that the
sweep the sheds.
Yeah, I mean, like we basically at the start of the academic year, the first team meeting was all about the book and the things that you could take away from it. Yeah, I mean, it was also so valid. I mean, ultimately, sweep the sheds is, be humble. I want to have a bottom up, top down approach to my business. Ultimately, if I go into, I think this is the inherent PE person, and maybe my OCD a little bit. But if I ever go into a PE cupboard and it's not shipshape, I just can't help but move things around and put it in the right way, and and it's just So I kind of feel like I walk the walk a little bit on that one.
That's definitely sweeping the sheds, isn't it? That's literally sweeping the sheds.
Exactly. That's sweeping the sheds from our industry's point of view, I think.
I was going to say, for people that maybe listen to this that are outside the sector, who may not know what a PE cupboard looks like in a primary school, let's put it this way: if Rob has OCD, he will literally spend probably half of his day in that PE cupboard just trying to get it in order.
Yeah, and take great pleasure from doing it as well. To be honest, I mean, I when I speak to teachers, one of the barriers they often come up with is, I go to the PE cupboard and not everything is there. And ultimately, we need to break down barriers for teachers. We need to make teaching of PE as easy as possible. So, let's get everything color coordinated and put in the right spot and
laminate those labels, Rob.
Laminate those labels. I'm a huge advocate for the importance of preparation.
And another kind of, I suppose, quickfire question would be, what one thing needs to happen to get more children more active more often?
Well, I think from listening to me today, you can tell that there's not often one thing. I find it difficult to focus on one thing. I mean, I think what I think here is it's about, and I mentioned it in a previous answer, it's about targets and accountability. Funding needs to continue, but it needs to be better monitored, and clear targets needs to be set and established. We exist in a system where we have very little data. We need data. We need to know how active children are during the school day. And we've treaded far too softly around the issue of childhood obesity, and the statistics and the results are not getting any better. So we need to know, we need to know on a weekly, daily, monthly, quarterly basis, how active our children are. That's the thing that we can have an impact on. We can obviously try and have an impact on some of the other stuff, the food education, which I've touched on. But I think targets and accountability is huge.
And then finally now, what is your advice to help other organisations crack the active code?
It's not a quick fix. I've worked in this industry for 15 years, and the problems that existed then do still exist today. The main thing I would say is remain focused on your core purpose. Remind yourself, remind your people, and remind your environment over and over and over again. We need to remain kind of clear on why it is we're doing what we're doing and what the goal for that is. And our purpose, our ambition as an organisation is to help create a healthier society for future generations, and we want to have an impact on that. So that's the purpose that we stay focused on at Moving Matters, and it will be different for different organisations. You might want to develop better footballers. You might want to provide a wider range of activities for young people. You might focus on competition. It's individual. It's focused on you, but it's really important to find that inherent drive, and then go with that.
Yeah, and I think that's really come through in this conversation, Rob. I think that's clear to us and to the listeners that really is kind of embedded in your organisation and yourself as a leader. And some of the reference points you've mentioned with legacy touches on that as well. And I know in the past we spoke about Simon Sinek and kind of the whole kind of find your why and the purpose around leadership and your organisation. So full credit to you. Moving Matters is doing some great work down in the London area, and long may that continue.
There's a final plug I wanted to do for Moving Matters, actually, Rob. I know you and your team have created some brilliant free resources for schools recently. If people want to access them or share them with children, schools, teachers they know, where can they find that?
So, you can get in touch with me, and I'm happy to share to anyone, really. I think ultimately this situation is really tough on lots of people, isn't it? And I think amazingly, as a sector, we've done some great work in sharing things that can keep children active at home. We've got like a weekly newsletter, which people can get added to, and we've got content like PowerPoint presentations with audio and video that people can. I'm happy to share with people. But I think probably the biggest tool is our YouTube channel, the Moving Matters YouTube channel, where we've created free videos for schools to access that are skills-based or activity-based within sort of different areas of the curriculum, sport or EYFS or some fundamental stuff. Got workouts in there. We're going to start some live stream stuff on Fridays at 1 p.m. and 2 p.m. each week through through our Moving Matters YouTube channel. So yeah, there's a few different things, and I think it's really just important to share things at the moment, in that ambition to get as many people active as home as possible, because that's a big challenge.
And on YouTube, Rob, what's the page? Is it just Moving Matters on YouTube?
Yeah, if you just go to the Moving Matters channel, obviously we'd like you to subscribe. Got a few more subscribers over the past month, so obviously you just get all the updates when you subscribe. But I mean, there's some, we started working on this basically through the summer period, to just try and create more visual resources for teachers, and obviously coaching companies and coaching staff can tap into that as well. Just go to Moving Matters, type in Moving Matters into YouTube, and you'll find us.
Brilliant. And be sure to connect with Rob on LinkedIn if you want to get in touch as well. It was great to speak to you, Rob. Thank you for that powerful discussion. There's a lot of key points people can take away. And take care.
Thanks, Rob.
All the best. Guys. Really enjoyed that. It's a really it's got real purpose, this ambition, this podcast. So it's good to be sharing my thoughts with you guys.
Thanks, Rob. Cheers.
Join us next time for the Active Code podcast. Remember to subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss an episode. You can connect with us on Twitter @aspire_partners and find out more about us and the network at www.aspireactivepartnerships.co.uk.